This is Gabriel Carrillo from the EdTech Bites podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you are listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com. And get ready, because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Instant Relevance Podcast. The Instant Relevance Podcast is an educational podcast featuring the latest news and resources to make learning relevant for all students. Follow us on Twitter at InstantRel. I'm Denis, Sheeran, author of Instant Relevance, using today's experiences to teach tomorrow's lessons, and Hacking Mathematics, 10 Problems That Need Solving. I'm a math teacher for 13 years and an administrator for 6, and I am excited to be podcasting.
I'm Raymond, the co-host of the Instant Relevance Podcast. I'm a K-8 math instructional coach in Rhode Island. I blog regularly at www.blendedlearningmath.com. I am also a guest writer at eSchool News and Education Post.
Welcome to episode 5 of the Instant Relevance Podcast. Thank you for joining us again. We're really excited to have you and our special guest, Tiffany Ott, who, if you follow her on Twitter, you know she is super exciting and super busy with Teach Better and the grid method, and has been sharing some excellent resources and some exciting teaching ideas that I can't wait to talk to her about in a little bit. But first, I was going to talk to everybody who's listening about there because I need to apologize. I think sometimes we need to think about the things we say, and sometimes we need to take something back that we said that wasn't right. And in a recent podcast, and even sometimes when I'm out there talking with people, I said in reference to fidget spinners that fad was huge in 2 years ago, and it was awesome and your kids loved it. But don't try to do a lesson with fidget spinners now, because your kids won't care. Because that fad is over. Because you know why? Google Trends told me that nobody is trending and searching for fidget spinners anymore. So I believed that and took it and said, hey, nobody cares anymore. But something interesting happened last week. And that was my wife called me over to her computer and said, check this out. You're not going to believe it. She shows me her Facebook page of this music teachers group that she's in. And there are kids learning rhythms with fidget spinners. They're literally standing there, spinning a spinner in their hand and stopping it to a quarter note, a half note, holding it and then stopping it. And I'm watching these kids, probably first grade, second grade, doing incredible rhythm work. And my wife has said, this is it. My kids had such problem holding half notes and dotted half notes for duration that this is going to show them how. And she did it in her class this week, and they loved it. So first, I've got to say, I'm sorry for telling you that, give up on fidget spinners, because I don't think you should give up on them. And I think the major lesson to take away from that is sometimes we're too quick to let that fad pass by, and we as creative professionals can still use those things that we once found value in, that our students once found value in creative and new ways. So I hope you take my apology, Ray, and are willing to move on with me anyway.
Yeah, I guess I can pull out that old lesson about slap bracelets and leg warmers, from the 80s, and I can just go ahead and dust that off and bring that out for the kids these days too. Just start pulling stuff out of the remnants of old fads box.
I think it's probably a good idea, but found that down into the real basis of what instruction is like today, and make sure that you model that. Make sure that you get those leg warmers on. You get those that headband and those slap bracelets on out there, and you really show those kids what jelly shoes are supposed to be like. And I think they'll probably learn a lot from that experience. I think I would.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you talk about great internet finds and, doing some good rhythm work. And I have something to share with everybody here. I don't know if everybody follows you on Twitter, but for the first time, I never knew that you were such a great singer. And you shared something on Twitter with you and your wife singing and your daughter doing some undercover work. So I'm just going to play a little bit of that for the listeners right now. So I was just really impressed. I knew that you were in a musical family and that, you know, your wife was a music teacher and that you guys sang, but man, you've got some pipes.
I tell you what, I didn't expect you to play that, but thanks. And my house, what my house is like. You know, we turn a corner and somebody's singing something, and whatever we hear, we fill in those gaps and sing. My wife and I have been harmonizing with whoever's been singing since probably we were, 5 years old. And I'm glad I found her, and I'm glad that we sync up and sing a lot together. So that was a really happy moment for me. I'm glad my daughter caught that one, even though she seems to have some pretty awful cinematography from the way she was shaking that camera around while she was recording us.
It's man on the street, it's gritty. It's in there, it's kind of in your face. It's groundbreaking.
And what's funny to me too is that my world is surrounded by music. It really is. I sing in a chorus on Monday nights. My wife sings in New York City on Wednesdays. She sings with Mondays too. My daughter plays oboe. My second daughter plays cello. They're in the marching band. It's crazy. There's just music everywhere. So you would think that I would know like everything that's going on in the world of music, but I have to admit, it's only been recently, maybe about 2 weeks ago, that I found out about this Baby Shark thing. And if you do not know what the Baby Shark thing is, then you need to look up the Baby Shark dance by Pink Fong on YouTube, and you will see that they have almost 1.8 billion hits to this video. And I said billion intentionally, not million, but billion. And this song is absolutely ridiculous. I watched this song and I'm like, what is going on here? Why is this song popular? This is honestly one of the stupidest things I have ever seen. And then 15 minutes later, I'm walking around my house singing it because that's why. It's stuck in my head. People are singing this. They're doing this dance at their weddings, for crying out loud. It's ridiculous. But I guess that's the message of the Instant Relevance podcast is I find it ridiculous, but look at the passion it's inspiring in me. Like I'm crazy hating this thing, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth really investigating. And I started looking around, and there are a ton of people using this for lessons, not just in a music class, but in pretty much everything you can think of to engage kids with this song because they know kids are loving it. So I am going to put out on my website, DenisSheeran.com, a lesson blog which has a hyperdoc in it with at least 25, if not more, Baby Shark lessons for different content areas and different grade levels. So if you're looking for that, it's going to be out there when we release this podcast. So if you hear this, then you can go to my website and check it out. But Ray, I got a question for you. I just introduced you to that song today. So off the top of your head, crazy song, crazy dance. How might you use that in your school?
Well, once again, I kind of have to go back to the archives and maybe dust off maybe a Harlem Shuffle lesson, or, I don't know, the Nene, like some other past dances that have kind of revolutionized the world for their own 5 minutes of fame. So I'm going to assume that this one's probably going to stick around just as long as those. But, I, in the classroom, was never one to shy away from dancing. I definitely participated in some Zumba a couple years in a row in front of my students. So I'm not ashamed to dance. So I'm sure if I was still in the classroom, I'd be doing this Baby Shark dance along with everybody else. But it's funny, you talk about just different fads. We've mentioned just a few, we're kind of going back and forth and saying things come up in the classroom. We obviously are looking at ways to make those relevant, but I had a conversation recently, and I was fortunate enough to be connected with a reporter at IGN who was doing an article about the relevance of Fortnite in the classroom. And last year, as a 7th grade math teacher, we saw huge changes from this, new video game fad in the classroom. And the question that this IGN reporter really had was, how is this any different than any other fad? Because for years, I can think back 10 years earlier in my teaching career, kids we're having arguments about video games, about, Call of Duty and Halo and stuff like that. And when I was 12, 13, I was having arguments about, Mario Brothers and Super Nintendo. So arguments about video games in school are definitely not a foreign thing, but really talking about how, Fortnite was kind of a transformational change and how really it shaped kind of the social structures of schools. And I had a really good conversation with him. And also it kind of brought me back to doing some relevant things with Fortnite in my classroom. I didn't particularly seek out Fortnite projects in my classroom, but it's funny just, with the fidget spinner, with any of these other fads, you have these long-term projects that you've done for maybe the last 5 years, kind of that go-to kind of good project that provides some voice and choice for the students. And you can almost kind of flip through those from the past 5 years, and you can tell what fads were important to kids based on just, what they chose. I bet you if I looked back 2 years ago, I'd have a couple of fidget spinner projects about slope intercept form. And then last year, same thing, same project, slope intercept form. And, Fortnite characters are popping up all over the posters. So doesn't really matter what it is, but we really should be driving to give the students that opportunity to socialize and talk about what is going on, because otherwise, it just isn't going to be relevant to them.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we want to make sure each time one of these things comes across our desk or our computer or our house or whatever brings it to our attention, step back for a second and think about what it is about this that makes it so interesting. When it came to fidget spinners, was it just because it was fun to play with, pure fun, the simple sound or the simple action of it? Was it, when it comes to Fortnite, there's a lot of conversation around how Fortnite is different than other games, and it has all of the elements of the things that kids really like. The things like a constantly different challenge, but collaborative, but yet competitive. And you can win without being the best. And you get new and creative things each time. And there's a time constraint to it that's not too crushing. It's slow moving time constraints. There's so many things that people really think that Fortnite might last a lot longer than other games because it has those components to it. And then this Baby Shark song, like, what is it? Is it just because it's got the right organization of things that it just sticks in your head, or is there more to it? And if you can recognize what the features are of that thing that's important to your kids, then you can bring those features into your classroom, whether you're using the fad or not. And I think that might be the right way to segue into Tiffany joining our show today, because she has a lot to say about looking for and really identifying the characteristics of excellent teaching and learning that regardless of what you're using as a tool for that learning, make for a successful classroom.
Yeah, I'm excited for this interview. I've kind of been involved in the Teach Better world for a little while, just through their different Twitter chats. I'm actually going to be a guest on the Teach Better podcast, or Teach Better Talk podcast. And I'm excited to talk to Tiffany because she really has the right mantra in mind for teaching. And first and foremost, teaching is a practice and it's not perfection. And with her Teach Better advocacy work that she does, and just getting out there and being on social media with the hashtag Teach Better, and really just saying that each and every day should be better than the day before, and we should just strive to just take that one small step every day, is really leading some great advocacy for the teaching profession. Kind of putting it out there that, no one's perfect, but we should all strive for each and every day to be better than the last, because that's what our students deserve.
Well, I'm ready to hear from her, so let's get to it. Tonight I went to my youngest daughter's kindergarten back to school night, and if you haven't seen a post I put up on Twitter, check it out, because I filled out a parent survey with nothing but jokes.
Nice.
I refuse to do this seriously anymore. I've had 4 kids go through schools. I'm done being serious. They asked what her needs in learning were, and I said keeping her political views out of the classroom. She's 5.
That's amazing.
All right. How are we doing, Ray? Good?
Yeah, we're good.
We are so excited tonight to have our special guest, Tiffany Ott, with us. She is coming to us from Western Reserve Academy in Northern Ohio, and we are excited to hear a little bit more about what she is doing with the Teach Better model and all of its components, and some exciting new things she's doing in her own classroom that I think some of us have been waiting to try, and we'll be learning from her and from her trials and errors this year with. So, Tiffany, welcome to the Instant Relevance Podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm really glad to be here. I've been teaching for 10 years. I can officially say I've hit the decade mark, which is exciting. I have taught everything from 3rd grade through 10th grade, math, science, reading. The only thing I haven't specifically taught is social studies. I really love to teach and I really love to learn more things. So I love what I do. I am currently a freshman math teacher at Western Reserve. And this is my first year there, so I'm still getting my feet wet with that. And I also do a lot of work with the Teach Better team, which is really all about helping other teachers find their own path towards being better. So seeing what they need, giving them what they need, and patting them on the back as they go and saying, you got this, being their cheerleader. So it's kind of me in a nutshell, I guess.
Well, congratulations on the decade mark. In January, I'm going to be on my 2-decade mark.
Ooh,
so
exciting.
I guess that exciting in some ways and not in others. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about the Teach Better component of your day and what that's about? I've seen it all over. I've talked a little bit with you about it when we met up in Indiana, but I still don't really know a lot about it. Tell me some more.
So Teach Better actually started as something else. It started as the grid method. And my very good friend, Chad Ostrowski, who is pretty much a genius, was a middle school science teacher in an urban district, very high poverty. And he had like the worst year of his career. And he said, all right, I need to change something. I either need to quit teaching and get a job at McDonald's, or I need to actually figure out how to make it so that I don't dread teaching every day of my life. And so he dug in, he did some research. He said, hey, this mastery learning stuff's pretty awesome. Let's figure out how to make it work in a classroom. So he developed this structure for planning mastery learning units called the grid method. So that was about 5 or 6 years ago. Started using it in his classroom, amazing results, amazing growth in his students. And then everybody started bugging him about, hey, what are you doing? So then he, with his good friend, Jeff Gargis, who's also amazing. You guys should all follow Jeff Gargis. He's fabulous. And he is really like an entrepreneur business side of things. And they got together and said, let's change the world and let's go do it. So they created this grid method company. I first learned about the grid method, 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, because Jeff actually was a manager at an Arby's where my husband worked. So I knew Jeff and I went to high school with his wife. So lots of connections here. And they said, hey, you should try this. And I said, okay, I'll try it. And the next week I was using a grid in my classroom. And a couple months later, they said, you should write a blog for us. So I wrote some blogs. Long story short, I have been on the journey with them now for a couple years. And as we've gone, we have grown into really a group of people who are helping other teachers find their way to be better than they were yesterday. So kind of my Teach Better philosophy and motto is be better today than you were yesterday and be better tomorrow than you are today. So continuous growth and continuous progress is really what I preach and help teachers find.
I think that's great because teachers need to be told today was a bad day, tomorrow's going to be a better day. And, they really do need, not just a coach, but also a cheerleader. So it's great that your organization not only helps with mastery learning and, puts a structure around that for planning, but it's also great that you guys have kind of extended your realm out into, really just advocating for the teaching profession. That's what I really like and what I've seen from your mastery chats and everything else that has come out of the Teach Better team. Just a shameless plug, I was a guest and I will be a guest on a future episode of the Teach Better Talk podcast with Jeff Gargis.
Awesome.
And is it Ray. I can't remember Ray's last name.
Hewart.
Yeah.
Although it's spelled Hughart.
Which is awesome, by the way.
Yeah. And she's
I think we should
great
just all
too,
call her
you know.
Hughart because she's so huggable. I love her.
So, yeah, I've really learned a lot just about, you know, advocating for the teaching profession, just, you know, being kind of part of your chats and being in the Teach Better realm and following you guys on Twitter and being a guest on the podcast. But could you maybe give, just because this is a teacher podcast and, you know, I'm a sucker for the details sometimes, do you mind giving a few more details about the grid method? I'm just interested to know, like, what that structure looks like. Like, is it a technology product or is technology involved? I guess I just would like to know a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
I would love to tell you more about that. I love talking about this. Okay, so the grid method is really all about looking at the standards that you have, because we all have standards. Standards aren't evil. I actually love standards. They give me a delightful little map to follow. And taking that standard and breaking it down, we really use the framework of depth of knowledge, Webb's depth of knowledge. So level 1, 2, 3, 4, getting increasingly complex as you move up the levels of depth of knowledge. So you take that standard you're given and you kind of break it down and say, okay, what's a level 1 DOK version of that standard? What's a level 2? What's level 3? How can I extend that to be a level 4 DOK activity? And then from that, you say, all right, what do my students need to do to show me they understand this? And you build these learning opportunities for each level. So maybe level 1, if I'm doing a unit on ecosystems, something I really need to do before I can grasp the more complex understanding of ecosystems is know what a producer is, what's a consumer, right? So a level 1 learning opportunity might be some like vocabulary work, refreshers on that, maybe watching an intro video. So it's not a tech tool, but you can build tech tools into it. And I do. There's lots of teachers who don't use any tech with the grid, and that's fine too. But I find that blending in technology really helps me hit things in a lot of different ways. Anyway, so then level 2 takes those skills from level 1, gets them more complex. How do you apply these to the real world? Level 3 gets it even deeper. So looking at like some open-ended questions, some higher order thinking questions. And so what you do is when you build this grid with these different levels of knowledge, you've created an individual mastery learning path that your students can progress through. So they finish a learning opportunity and then they have to prove to you, yeah, I understand what you wanted me to get out of this. I can tell you what a consumer is and what a producer is. And then I, as the teacher, give them a little signature and say, all right, you can move on to the next learning opportunity. And what ends up happening is you have students in your classroom who are all working on different things. But because you've done this backwards design process and you've planned through what that mastery path looks like, you can manage it because they all have somewhere to go next. And here's why it was so significant for me is because I've been trying to do a mastery-based classroom for darn near a decade. And I just always got bogged down with organization and how to manage all those different things happening at once. And I really, really wanted to differentiate for my students, but I couldn't figure out how to make it work. As soon as I started planning a grid and implementing the grid, the mastery grid in my classroom, it's like all those pieces that I was trying to put together in a million different ways came together in one way and made it so that I could do mastery learning without going absolutely insane. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a great answer. And I really like how what you're talking about with creating these different, or creating the pathway for students to get not only to mastery, but that deeper understanding of the standard. It seems like what you're setting them up for is allowing them to do more or get to the standard and get to mastery of the standards in a self-paced way. So really what you're doing is you're almost developing like a playlist. So you're really talking about, you know, putting structure around planning a blended learning lesson. And, you know, that's why it seems like something, a great tool that would really help because oftentimes when planning a blended learning lesson or, you know, doing a playlist, you kind of get lost in the weeds a little bit.
Yes.
And this really, it seems like focuses those learning outcomes, not only to make sure that they, they hit all those depth of knowledge levels, but also that you're really making sure that, you have your sights set on the mastery of that standard.
Yeah, and the key too is after each learning opportunity kids do, a lot of times I've seen playlists done really, really well by some amazing teachers, but I've also seen it really act just like a checklist. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And the thing that I like about this mastery learning approach is that after each learning experience, the kid then has to come up to you and say, okay, not this is the worksheet I did or this is the video I watched, but to say to you, I'm ready to prove to you that I understand this. And that slight shift has made all the difference in my classroom.
That's outstanding to me too, because that's one of the things that as an administrator, it was difficult for me to struggle to communicate. I struggled to communicate with some teachers how I wanted assessment to not be an end point, but a starting point. And if a kid is struggling after an assessment, you'd better not just run away from it. You better find a way for him to come back to you later and say, I get it now. Can I show you? And if that's naturally built into the structure and to the culture that you have in your classroom, that makes it possible in all ways. And what I also like about tying the grid with the depth of knowledge component is you might have a student who finds a particular connection or interest in that topic that you've been given in that learning opportunity and has decided that they want to actually go deeper into it. And although they could completely demonstrate mastery for you now, they're not coming to you yet because they're not done learning it yet. They want to go further into it. They want to learn some more things. They want to try some of the more rich, deep experiences in it. Whereas another student could come up and say, I get this, and I'd like to show you how, at a much, I'll call it more superficial level, but at the same time complete. And that also individualizes and differentiates by desire and interest. Yeah. So I think that's really exciting to see.
I have a background in gifted education. My undergraduate degree was in middle school math and science plus a gifted endorsement. And so for me, this is like this beautiful marriage between differentiation that supports the needs of my gifted learners and the needs of my struggling students. And so I could talk on and on about how much I love it. And I know I'm going on and on. It's such an amazing structure for me that has transformed my classroom.
Well, why don't you go on and on instead in your new experience now, the teaching opportunity that you have at Western Reserve, and what you're trying to do now that it's a private school, you have a little bit more freedom potentially. You said told me earlier that you were layering in some things that you were really been working on. So why don't you tell us the ingredients of that sandwich and let us know what's going on?
Yeah, so I tend to, when I figure something out, I say, okay, now what can I add to it? So I feel like at this point, I've got kind of the grid method and mastery learning under my belt. And I want to say, where can I go from here? So I have this job now at Western Reserve Academy, and it's my first year at a private school. It's a boarding school. It's a totally different kind of environment. But I'm also working with students who struggle the most with math. So I have the freshmen who have the lowest entrance scores in math. And so I really want to not only help them move through the math at their own pace in a mastery-based classroom environment, but I also want them to care about it. And when you have kids who traditionally really struggle in math, they have a lot of anxiety about it. They have a lot of fear, and they feel like it doesn't matter in their life, right? How many times have math teachers heard, when am I ever going to use this?
Don't get me started.
I know. And I'm like, but it's such amazing problem-solving thinking, but that doesn't always fly with freshmen. So what I wanted to do this year is layer in a really strong emphasis on real-world relevance and connections to the community and connections to the kids' lives down the road. And so Ray Hewert, we already mentioned her a few times, but she is like the queen in my eyes of bringing community into the classroom. And she creates these amazing mock internships for her students where they actually get to explore, let's say in medicine, how a doctor uses math and how that can all meld together into this really engaging experience for students that pulls them into it, right? It's like telling a story. And so I said, okay, well, I guess I'll just do that this year. And I started planning that. And my first unit, I was racking my brain about what to do. And then one night we were having like a family board game night and played Battleship. And my first unit was supposed to be all about like coordinate planes and graphing and all this kind of stuff. So I just had this moment where I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to connect with the Navy and pretend we are naval recruits training. And we're going to level up through the grid as we study what on earth all this math stuff has to do with the Navy and existing in the Navy. So that was really cool. It was a lot of work, I'm not going to lie, but it was really neat when that all came together and the kids were like, wait a second, I get to go on missions and I get to earn like approved stamps, like I'm official. And I get to do all these things that are not just sitting down doing a 20-question math worksheet. And so like really seeing that come together in this really awesome, engaging way was like, yep, I got to do that all year long. So the unit that we're currently in right now, we are actually looking at the stock market and investigating like the variability in the stock market and how it could be, how the stock could rise or fall. And we're talking absolute value. And the piece de resistance of this unit is that they get to create an investment portfolio proposal for the Black Panther.
Wow,
which is just so fun.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm really excited. They haven't seen that part yet. I get to unveil it to them next week. So there's just so many ways that we can bring all these elements into our classroom. And to go back to the work that I do with the Teach Better team and working with teachers, sometimes people look at the mastery learning I do and the standards-based grading and this community engagement, real world relevance stuff. And they're like, oh my gosh, I could never do all that. How do you do it? And I always want to help people see that you can do one piece. You can take a step. The only thing you can't do is not take a step at all. And so I see my role both like in my classroom right now with the students I work with all the time and with the teachers I teach with and the teachers I work with outside of Western Reserve. I see my role really to be that like, you can totally do this, guys. You can take an idea and just implement that. And then when you get that under your belt, don't rest, layer another one on. So like if you had told me 10 years ago I was going to be doing mastery learning, standards-based grading, and community relevance internships, I would have looked at you like I was nuts. But as teachers, we just have to continuously push ourselves forward one step more, one step more, one step more. And as people who help train educators and support educators, our sole job is to show them like, hey, you can do this. I believe that you can do this, and let's take a step together.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a large part of your job as, or anybody's job who's a coach or a leader of teachers really is convincing them to start small. I feel like a lot of teachers see kind of the larger task and how much work implementing something new is going to be. And, it's hard to kind of take it all on. But if you just do it one step at a time, it's a lot more manageable. And one thing I wanted to go back to is you talked about the mock internships, which I think is a great idea. And it sounds like what you've kind of, in your classroom, in your experience, you've taken this grid method and this structure of lesson planning and really turned it into some really great project-based learning for your classroom. I actually just today had PD all day. I went on an educator tour, education innovation tour through Ed Basecamp, it was NE Basecamp here in Rhode Island. And we went to 3 different schools and we saw all different types of project-based learning, all types of personalized learning and blended learning, different technology tools involved in that. And, I'm really excited about kind of bringing back those ideas and hopefully getting more professional development for my teachers in building out project-based learning, because some of the learning experience I saw students going through today were pretty powerful, working on long-term personalized projects that, not only connect to the curriculum, but also allow them to take their own interests and run with it. It's really powerful to see.
And it's really about setting the stage and setting the kind of like the guidelights for students to experience it themselves. I'm a big fan of like experiential learning, right? Like I'm not just telling you, hey, stockbrokers look at variability and absolute value when they're making decisions. I'm saying, hey, you're in training to become a stockbroker on Wall Street. And these are the things that you have to do to be able to get there. And then where are you going to go from there? So it's, you know, it's not like a prescribed, like, do this, do this, do this. It's, here's the path. Let's see where you go with the path. And when you do that, when you open that up for students to really explore, they can just blow your mind with the amazing ideas they come up with. Once you show them that they can, because sometimes they live in this world where they believe they can't do that because we've trained it out of them after years of sitting in classrooms. But once you get them to the point where they're like, oh, I can explore this, and then they just take off, and it's amazing to watch.
Tiffany, that's one of the things that's starting to layer here for me as well is what you're saying about the way kids, when they realize that they can explore and that they decide to, and they take off with their learning and they really devote themselves to it, is the same thing that happens to teachers. Once they realize that they can explore new ways of teaching and new things to do with kids and new ways of assessing mastery and teaching content. And what you see is that in order for our students to become confident learners and able to express their mastery, our teachers need to become master learners and understand that idea, which is what you're trying to do with the professional development that you do and the training. So not just give teachers, here's a plan, follow it, and watch the beautiful garden grow of your children's mastery learning. No, it's get your butt in there and do the work and think about what it means to become a better teacher every day and to learn every day. And you'll have your ups and downs, but being better doesn't mean always winning. It means struggling too. And I think that there's a really positive layered connection in that. And in a school culture where leaders are helping teachers grow in that way and teachers are helping students grow in that way, then it really truly is like a better school. And I think it's an excellent model and an excellent idea, and I don't know if enough people know about it. So would you give us some more information about how people can contact you or learn more about Teach Better or jump in on a Twitter chat? Give it all to us so that we can find you whenever we need you.
You got it. So all sorts of ways to connect with me. And I have to say, I love nothing more than opening my email and getting an email from a random teacher saying, I don't know what this is, but help me figure it out. Makes me so happy. So email first, Tiffany, very simple, Tiffany@thegridmethod.com. So that's one way to reach me. I am also, I'm on Twitter constantly. I love Twitter. My Twitter name is @TechieTeachOtt. And if you send me a direct message or a tweet and I don't answer it, just nag me because I get like hundreds of things every day. So just bug me and I promise I want to talk to you. Every Thursday night, also, the entire Teach Better team hosts a mastery chat, #mastery chat. And that's actually, I'm really proud of that. It's my baby. I started it about 1.5 years ago, and it has just grown so much. And 8 p.m. Eastern time, come talk with us, hang out with us. We also go live on Facebook afterwards in the Teach Better team private group. So there's just so many ways to reach us. Oh, and if you want to know more about the grid method or Teach Further or any of the other kind of training options we do, go to teachbetter.com. There's a slew of free things you can download and lots of resources. And finally, teachbetteracademy.com. There is a free course on the grid method, a free course on Teach Further. I've got a free course up there on tech tools that you can use to teach better. And there's just a whole lot of awesomeness. So I think I hit all the main ones for how you can reach out to me.
Thank you, Tiffany. That was an abundance of information. And what you're going to end up getting is hopefully a lot of context from a lot of people, because a lot of people listen to the Instant Relevance podcast. So I want to thank you again for being our special guest for episode 5 and for sharing what you're doing. And it excites me. It makes me want to come back to Ohio and visit your school and watch this in action. So be in touch with me, because I would love to find a way to get out there again, even if it just means stopping there when I'm passing through. So make sure that we get a chance to connect and see this in action, because I think it's something worth sharing with my teachers and to put that bug in their ear of what it really means to teach better and to encourage mastery learning. So thank you for sharing with us tonight, and we are excited for all that you do. And I know that you have 2 full-time that are called 2 part-time jobs, plus all the other things that you do at home and in life. So thanks for giving us your time tonight, and all the best.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.